Today's episode of Expanded Perspectives is sponsored by Gaia.com. Help find your own truth by exploring perspectives you won't find in the mainstream on some of life's biggest mysteries. Whether it's grand conspiracies, breakaway societies, UFOs, ancient civilizations, lost wisdom, as well as the paranormal, all at your fingertips. Stream videos anywhere from your living room or on the go with access to over 7,000 titles, all available to you with a monthly plan for only $9.95 a month. If you sign up now, the first month is only 99 cents. And there are multiple plans to choose from, including a 3-month plan and an annual plan. If you enjoy expanding your perspective, then you'll enjoy Gaia.com. Gaia.com. Gaia.com.
Friends, and thanks again for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale, and of course, the man that needs no introduction, but I always seem to find a way to do it, and he's tinkering with his phone, Mr. Kyle Filson.
How's it going, everybody?
You updating your status?
No, I was just putting it on mute. I've forgotten several times.
We've done that.
It'll start blowing up in the middle of recording, and then, of course, you got to go back and edit that stuff out.
Re-record. Yeah, it's happened.
What are the joys of recording?
It's happened.
I just remembered it as you were speaking, yeah.
Well, folks, we're here. This is going to be the last Monday show of 2016. Of course, we're going to roll into the new year. We're recording this a little before Christmas, so we can't tell y'all what we got as gifts because we've got a lot of stuff going on. Me and Kyle are fixing to be inundated with family things. So we're actually pre-recording this just a couple of days, and then we're going to have to go get busy. So
as much as my wife likes me doing the show, when it comes to like Christmas, especially with it being on the weekend, there's no chance of me getting away to actual podcast. She's like, you need to do that stuff early. You're going to spend some time with the family.
You're like, yes, ma'am.
So like I mentioned on the last Elite show, I'll probably be spending a lot of my time, like I said, assembling toys. I mean, that's the thing, is I have to do all this assembly. Some of the toys have like pages of stickers, and you got to figure out where they go and stuff. Sometimes I fib, and I just start making up places where they go.
Are you a directions guy?
No.
You're a no directions guy, aren't you?
Yeah, I really don't like the directions.
They don't even need to put them in the packages that I get.
I like the ones nowadays. They don't even have words. It just has pictures.
Well, that's easier for people like me to figure out. Yeah, that's 100% way easier for people like me to figure out.
I tried to get the Bruds. This was several years ago, like this cool... I remember it was like a samurai warrior or something. It was like a 600-piece Lego thing, and I thought it would be cool to have it fully constructed under the tree. 4 hours later, I was like, I'm never doing this again. They're going to get the box. Let them figure out how to do it. You know what I mean?
Way too much work.
You ever been to Legoland?
I've never. Well, by the time all that stuff came around, my kids were kind of above all that.
I guess.
Like when I take my son to Legoland, it's like Cabela's, or I got to take him to the Antebellum Ale House or whatnot. I mean, hell, he's 23. I mean, so it's one of those deals. His Legos are like, Dad, buy me a steak and a cold beer. You know, it's one of those deals. So, yeah. And then my daughter, she's really not into those. My daughter is into... I've learned more about like makeup brushes and different kinds of makeup and makeup techniques and photography and all. I've learned more about that in the last 6-8 months from my daughter than I have ever even known was on. I didn't realize makeup was as big a deal as far as application. Like the stuff I look at on YouTube isn't what she looks at. And I look up, there are hundreds of thousands of these makeup Facebook or YouTube channels where they're just putting on all this.
Teaching you how to do it. Yeah.
Man, I had no idea there was so much going into it. I mean, it's not like special effects. It's like, so now it's hard to trust these women. I don't know what they look like now.
Yeah, I don't know anything about makeup. I remember when I was a kid, though, and watching, like American Werewolf in London and stuff. I daydreamed of growing up to do that one day. I think that would be very cool. Like, remember the movie FX or whatever?
Yes.
That would be very neat. Of course, I never got into it.
Yeah, it would be really awesome.
Yeah, but let's get the show started. The final show of 2016 here on Expanded Perspectives. Let's get into the news. Check this out, Cam. China has built a working version of NASA's Impossible engine and plans to use it in space. According to reports, scientists in China claim they have actually successfully created a working prototype of the Impossible reactionless engine. That's what it's called. And they say that they've already begun testing it in orbit aboard their Tiangong 2 space laboratory. I know that's your favorite one.
Hey now.
The Tiangong 2.
Yes. I got the shirt.
Yeah, it says this radical and revolutionary fuel-free EmDrive has created a buzz in the scientific community after a paper was published by scientists at NASA who showed the technology works successfully. I guess they tested what the Chinese were claiming, and they're like, yeah, they've done it.
They figured it out. They got it.
They say the physics-defying engine is said to be able to help bring mankind to Mars in only 10 weeks.
Whoa.
While experts in the U.S. and Europe debate whether or not the engine works or whether or not it's viable for space, scientists with the Chinese Academy of Space Technology claim that NASA has the results, and they have reconfirmed what we claim. The Chinese Space Agency plans to implement this new engine in the satellites as soon as possible. They said scientists have been left surprised after tests have shown that this EmDrive, which has no fuel, completely shatters Newton's third law, which states that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Now, I remember on the Expanded Perspectives Elite last week, I was talking about how Sir Isaac Newton's book was sold for $3.7 million.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool. The IB Times UK reports that researchers with CAST, which is a subsidiary of the Chinese Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, confirmed at a recent press conference in Beijing that the Chinese government has been funding research into this new EmDrive technology since 2010, and that they've already created a device that is currently being tested in space as we speak. Chief designer Li Fang of CAST Communications Satellite Division claims that the team has successfully designed a prototype that generates a few millinewtons of thrust. They say for the engine to work on practical satellites, they're going to have to ramp up those levels to something around 1 Newton. But so they basically have the design planned. It is a working prototype. They haven't implemented it yet. They've tested it in space, and they're figuring out how to do this. And they think that only in the next couple of years they'll be able to do it. And of course, if they can do it, and they're letting NASA check out their work, of course, we're going to have the same technology. So I guess I have a few questions. What's incredible is it uses no fuel. It doesn't really get into how it actually works. I'm sure you could look that up on the internet, but we're not going to dedicate a whole show to that. But in order to get humans from Earth to Mars in only 10 weeks, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I guess my thing is, if you're moving through space at that time, through space and time at that speed, you really have to worry about running into an object. I mean, we're not talking about a meteorite or an asteroid. I mean, what if something the size of this candle or like a softball? I mean, if you hit that thing going as fast as that, wouldn't it rip right through the hull? I don't know. Space, I think space is far more scary than what's portrayed on TV. You know, like they always show the Millennium Falcon go into hyperspace and all the stars turning the lines.
Yeah.
Dude, you got to make sure that you don't run into anything while you're going that speed, or it'll just rip you apart. I mean, I guess in the movie, their computer is calculating that, but I mean, who knows? They never really get into the details.
They never get into the details.
It's like, oh, that's a cool idea, but no, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you bring it up because that's the first thing I thought of. When you're talking about going even faster, I'm like, well, how do you steer it? How do you dodge things while it's coming in? It's not like everything up there is just stationary, and you can just...
we don't even know where everything is. That's the scary part.
I mean, it's moving, and you're moving, and you're just like, just racing.
Constantly, these asteroids and meteors are hitting the Earth, and they're not even knowing that they're there till like 3 days before they're here.
Yeah. Look, I'm not riding up there. I'm not going to Mars. I don't care if it took a day. I'm not going.
No.
There's enough stuff here that I haven't seen. So, no, you'll have all the fun up there you want.
Well, we can terraform Mars. Yeah, so what? So we can destroy it like we're doing our own planet?
Exactly.
I mean, if you have the technology to take a broke planet and fix it, why don't we just fix the one we're on?
I've seen the original Total Recall, what happens to those earlier settlers, and I'm not going to come. I already look hideous enough. I don't need to go up there and be some sort of altered, hideous being.
That's why you're learning about makeup.
That's right. So I can cover it up. Good call. Well, as long as you're going to be talking about something wild, get a load of this, man. Now, I know that you actually covered this, I believe, a few shows ago. I believe you brought up that a submerged Stone Age settlement they had found mapped there in the Baltic Sea that was off the coast of Sweden. It's about 9,000 years ago is what they found. Well, get a load of this. That area there that lived, and there was once a lagoon, and this is what happened. Not only did they find this site 7 years ago, but divers were finding something they didn't quite understand. So they got to looking around, they were like, what is this? So they go, well, you know what it looks like? Stationary fish traps. That's what it looks like, a stationary fish trap. We all know as much as I love fishing. We all love fishing. Turns out these fish traps they were finding a good ways from this site are actually part of the site. They found more that they know now.
That was a river at one time?
It was a lagoon. So before the ocean came up, there was a lagoon. They built these sites. It says there was once a large lagoon environment where the humans lived during these parts of the year. Now, there's a lead researcher, Anton Hassan. That's the doctoral student there in geology at Lund University. And his colleagues reconstructed what the lagoon settlement would have looked like during this time using a type of sonar system called multi-beam echo sounder technology. They mapped the whole surface of the site, about 65 feet below sea level and nearly 2 miles from the current shoreline there. So you can only imagine finding this. This is going to be something would be insane to even stumble across, and start looking, especially now that they're mapping it out. This is what he said. These sites have been known, but only through scattered finds. He said, we now have the technology, of course, for more detailed interpretations of the landscape there. They uncovered a total of 8 ancient fishing traps made of rods and braided hazelwood. There's a 9,000-year-old pickaxe that was made out of elk horn. And there's also some inscription they've got to read on them that they're not sure what they say. So like we discussed, all this old stuff that they found. But the coolest thing to me says these fish trap constructions are the oldest known in northern Europe. They indicate extensive riverine and lagoonal fishing previously not recorded during the Mesolithic in Sweden.
That's cool, man. I saw a show one time where they were showing these fish traps, not only in rivers, but in lagoons. When the ocean tide rises, the fish get in there, and then when it goes, they've built this stuff so it traps them in there. You can go pick them up. Same thing with the rivers. What they'll do is they'll find an area that gets flooded by either the rising tides or the river, and while it's down, they'll get a bunch of rocks.
Yep.
And they'll kind of channel and form, and that's where they'll put their trap. And when the water comes up, and then when it goes back down, the fish have nowhere to go.
Little pools.
They go right into those traps. I mean, it's an ingenious way, and you could be at the house just chilling, or the shack, or whatever you're living in.
Yeah.
Oh, it's time to check the traps. And you go down there. Yep, we got dinner.
My thing is this. When I go to look at this and read and find more stuff out about all these things, this is what... was this something learned, or was this something taught?
I'm sure it was learned at one point and then taught,
Well, everything's
down.
that way. But what I'm saying is, did they stumble upon this on their own, or is this more of... Did somebody show up and teach them? Was there another culture that taught these, or were these a breakaway people? And they were just like we know how to do it now. Not everybody can do it properly, but we know how to do it. If the world ended like we always discussed, and everybody was thrown back into that time.
What time period did they say these traps came from?
Mesolithic.
Okay.
So 9,000 years ago. Now, they did say this, that since the sea level is now higher today than during the Holocene, he says that he believes that many of these earlier settlements are still currently underwater.
Which the Holocene is what we're living in now, in case you're wondering. 9,000 years ago. So maybe, much like a lot of the history tells us, these bearded men would come with knowledge, these Viracochas, these people from Atlantis, these people from Aztlan, whatever you want to call it. What's the High Brazil? What's the other one? Mu.
There's tons of spots.
Yeah, maybe some of these, you're right. Maybe they met these people and taught them these tricks.
Well, the strange thing about this is the very last thing is this Haväng site, which is where these are found, was already buried in settlement, it says, or in sediment, when the sea level began to rise.
See?
So they don't really know. It's hard to tell. We don't know when it was covered up.
The seas began to rise around 12,000 years ago, I believe.
Maybe not in that area. Maybe it had already risen a little bit. Maybe they were a little bit closer, and it had already risen way before that or way after. I mean, there's no, but he did say that it says that this sediment helped preserve the site.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm sure they have found some things there that they've tested, and that's where they get this 9,000-year-old date. Or maybe they haven't. Maybe they're going off this settlement, and they're like, okay, well, we know what culture that's part of, so it was 9,000 years ago. But when I saw that part, it instantly made me think, What if they're already jumping to conclusions? What if they're already going, okay, well, that's part of this, when maybe you should investigate it as maybe it's a much older civilization.
Well, I think you're right, and I think they do jump to conclusions. I think the truth is they don't know.
Or maybe it's a much younger civilization. Maybe these are just, maybe it is 9,000 years old, and it is the survivors of the floods. The last, maybe that's what it was there, or it was there in a very temperate time before the waters rose.
You're very well.
Who knows?
You don't know, and I think it's okay to say you don't know.
Yeah.
You look at the evidence, you make the best educated guess you can, and then as more evidence presents itself, you change your theory, you change your model.
But I love the idea of this fish trap thing because now we've learned that it's another way of hunting and gathering. You're providing food for your family off these fish traps too. So it's not the idea of just eating nuts and berries and trying to kill something. You're like, yeah, like you said, we set these fish traps. Once you build them, they're constantly catching.
While they're catching fish, you're doing something else. You're tanning hide. You're growing, tending crops, or you're out hunting.
Or you're just relaxing.
When you go, imagine having a longbow or a recurve with you. You're going hunting for deer. While you're fish traps, you come back, you got a little surf and turf for dinner.
That's right.
I mean, that sounds a lot better than working in a cubicle nowadays.
I'm with you. I
think I would have liked to have lived as a hunter-gatherer. I may not lived as long, but the quality of life might have been better.
Would have been more fun.
I don't think humans are meant to be like we're doing, talking to these devices and staring at these screens. And
probably
whoever's listening to this is also staring at their screen, or they've got a device. Yeah, it's cool and all, but I don't think that's what we're meant for.
No, that's not what we're meant for. We've just kind of niched ourselves into this.
Well, sticking with water, this is pretty cool. This is about a monster reptile found off Chatham Island, and this comes from Nick Redfern's World of Whatever. It's a pretty interesting story. F.W. Kemp was an officer in British Columbia, Canada. Along with his wife and son, Kemp had an extraordinary encounter midway through the 1930s. It was an encounter with something that can only be classified as a monster. Kemp's own words make it abundantly clear. So impressed was by the encounter, Kemp contacted the media, and his account reads as follows. On August 10th, 1932, I was with my wife and son on Chatham Island in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. My wife called my attention to a mysterious something coming through the channel between Strong Tide Island and Chatham Island. Imagine my astonishment on observing a huge creature with its head out of the water traveling about 4 miles per hour against the tide. Even at that speed, a considerable wash was thrown on the rocks, which gave me the impression that it was more reptile than serpent to make such displacement. The channel at this point is about 500 yards wide. Swimming to the steep rocks of the island opposite, the creature shot its head out of the water on the rock and, moving its head from side to side, appeared to be taking its bearings. Then, fold after fold, its body came to the surface. Towards the tail, it appeared serrated, with something moving flail-like at the extreme end. The movements were like those of a crocodile. Around the head appeared a sort of mane, which drifted round the body like kelp. The things present seemed to change the whole landscape, which made it difficult to describe my experiences. I did not seem to belong to the present scheme of things, but rather to the long ago when the world was young. The position it held on the rocks was only momentary. My wife and 16-year-old son ran to a point of land to get a clearer view of this thing. I think the sounds they made disturbed this animal. The sea being very calm, it seemed to slip back into the water, and there was a great commotion under the surface, and it disappeared like a flash. In my opinion, its speed must be terrific, and its senses of smell, sight, and hearing developed to a very high degree. It would be terribly hard to photograph, as its movements are different from anything I've ever seen or heard of. I should say its length to be not less than 80 feet. There were some logs on Strong Tide Island, which gave me a good idea to the size of the monster as it passed them. I took a measurement on the next day, and it looks like it was over 60 feet in length. The creature overlapped it to a large extent on each end. Now, that is a crazy sighting from 1932.
That's a heck of a creature.
Not just him and his wife and son all saw this thing. Very interesting. I know people love those cryptozoology stories. If you like Nick Redfern, you like some of his work, you should check out his website, The World of Whatever. Very cool blog.
Yeah. What could that possibly be? I mean, legitimately, what are you going to scare up and try to find out what that thing is? I get you something else that's scarier than that crypto creature in the water, homie.
Okay.
The UN is to debate killer robot ban next year, they say, as experts warn time is running out to stop the AI weapons. Now, we talked about this months and months ago.
We're talking about this for 5 years.
It's coming up. It says over 100 nations that are part of the International Convention on Conventional Weapons will debate a ban on so-called killer robots next year. At their 5-year review conference in Geneva, the 123 nations that are part of the International Convention on Conventional Weapons agreed to formalize their efforts next year to deal with the challenges raised by weapon systems that would select and attack targets without meaningful human control.
Yeah.
It says it comes as experts warn time is running out and that we have to get control, of course, of the technology. Now, Steve Goose is the arms director of Human Rights Watch and co-founder of the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, and this is what he had to say. The government's meeting in Geneva took an important step towards stemming the development of killer robots, but there's no time to lose. Once these weapons exist, there will be no stopping them. The time to act on a preemptive ban is now. And you and I have talked about that. Once you let the genie out of the bottle, how do you put it back in?
Exactly. You can't.
And that's exactly what they're saying. Now, it goes on here, and of course it talks about that it's going to take place for 2 weeks in 2017. They're in Geneva on the ban, of course, of lethal autonomous weapons. Said the talks will begin in April or August, and 88 countries have agreed to attend. And the weapons have not yet been developed, but technology, of course, is rapidly moving in that direction. Now, it says for the first time, China said in Geneva it seems a need for a new international instrument on lethal autonomous weapons systems. It comes as fear rises that new technology could lead humans to relinquish control over decisions to use lethal force. Now, Bonnie Dorchy earlier this year was writing for The Conversation, and this is her quote, says this: as artificial intelligence advances, the possibility that machines could independently select and fire on targets is fast approaching. Now, we've talked about this multiple times. We even covered this story again, and at least now they're 100% going to meet. You know, they said they were talking about it whenever we'd first covered this story months and months ago, that it was first going to be discussed if they needed to get together. Well, apparently, not only do they need to, that they are getting together. So hopefully, we might need to pump the brakes on this killer robot stuff right quick. We don't need to see any more of that. But folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, instead of superhuman killer robots, we're just going to discuss people with superhuman powers. That's right, folks. Superhumans that live among us. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. And we are back and ready to get into some superhumans. We're going to discuss a little superhuman activity. And Kyle, I'm going to throw a lot of this to you. Now, it's always been fascinating to most everyone, the idea of people with extraordinary or superpowers.
Yeah.
And just look at the popularity of Superman and how long his story and how long it's been going. It's been around forever. And the whole idea of it. Also, look how much money Marvel's made off the Avengers series. Yeah. All the spin-off movies.
Television shows.
Exactly. Now, I believe it's something, of course, at one time or another that we've all dreamed of. To be able to run faster than anyone else, to be super strong, have the ability to fly, or, according to Christopher Walken, have a tail.
Yeah.
I also think that we as a human collective don't think or do much on a small scale. It's always large scale. Extreme abilities, or it's not even worth talking about. You follow me?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. So keeping with that way of thinking is a very limiting use to us, I believe, as a species. And I ask you this, how many listening to this show right now can throw a baseball over 100 miles an hour? Kyle, can you throw a baseball over 100 miles an hour?
No, sir. If I even attempted, my shoulder would probably come disconnected from my body.
You and I have played baseball. We've played softball. We've played together, all this. So I want to look back at this, folks, and just follow along with me here. We're going somewhere with all of this. So I want to look back. If you look at little things like that, it's something we can all do, but not all of us have the ability to do it that way. There were 5 people that did it this year, just in 2016 alone, during playing time. 3 of them were from the Yankees, folks. 3 of them were from the Yankees. Dylan, but I don't even know how to say his last name, Batance. He actually threw one at 101. Mr. Noah Syndergaard of the Mets threw one at 101.3. Another Yankees fastball fella, Nathan Eovaldi, threw one at 101.6. And then, of course, Mauricio Cabrera from the Braves, he maxed, get a load of this. He averaged in his first 9 games for the Braves this year, he averaged 100.2 miles an hour.
Don't forget about our oldest Chapman from the Cubs, right?
We're getting to him. He's the number 1. Chapman is I knew you were going to bring him up because you always talk about Chapman.
Actually, one of the fastest guys I've ever seen, I don't know where he's probably not even playing anymore, was a guy named Joel Zamaya off the Tigers. Dude, I swear to God, I've watched a documentary where they were showing the fastest fastball or whatever.
Was his nasty?
I swear to God, I saw a game one time, and I believe it was a playoff game where he threw like 108.
Wow.
I mean, it was one pitch, but still, the guy had a serious. I think in all reality, what happened to the guy is he threw really hard for about 4 years and then just
that
his
was
arms
it.
completely
You're done.
shot.
You're done. Yeah. Well, you bring up Chapman. Well, he actually on July 18th at Yankee Stadium, it says that he entered a game with a 1-run lead, and it gave their fans, they say, their money's worth. He threw 4 of the fastest pitches of the season. All of them topped out at 104 miles an hour. And then he's starting in the 9th inning against the Orioles. All of them were pitched at 105.1 miles an hour. And that would have previously tied Chapman's actually record for the fastest pitch, but it is only at 105. So he almost, I mean, the whole thing is the way he's running. But I say that because
beating up on the Yankees is even better.
Right. But I mean, listen, I say all of this. This whole thing is because would you consider that superhuman?
Yeah, I would.
You should.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. Most of us don't. We all think of it as if you don't have the ability to like take bullets to the face and it not hurt you, or the fly, or to pull a tree out of the ground with your bare hands, you're not superhuman. But whereas we can all do this, but we can't all throw that fast.
Nobody on Earth.
Exactly. He's one of the few. This is one of the 5 few. I went to looking back in it to really look at how long it had been going on. If you just go back 20 years, it's almost non-existent. There are few and far between as compared to what they're doing now. Now, granted, it's because we're learning how to do it and all that, but still, a learned thing is something that you can do.
Nolan Ryan, probably.
Yes. So the reason, like I say, I bring these up because any of us can pick up a baseball right now, but very few of us can actually do this. So I say, are they superhuman? Now, I know a lot of you are yelling at me right now saying, man, that's different. They all learned how to do it. That if we all practiced, we could. Well, that may be. And, to Sue, I say maybe you could. Because, I mean, after all, Spider-Man was normal, and then he got bit.
By radioactive spider.
Then he had to learn how to use his powers.
And when they quit, why do they keep remaking that one movie?
Because you love it so much.
Last 10 years, they've remade the same movie like 8 times.
Yes. Yeah. So, and like I brought up to you just then, we don't need to see something as superhuman if we all can't do it the same as we talked about with Usain Bolt, fastest man alive. We can all run. But you can't run at that speed. But then I started, okay, let me go a little bit deeper. Have you ever heard of the fella named Daniel Kish?
No. Is he kin to Bella Kish?
No. I hope not. Daniel was born in 1966, and when he was 13 months old, he had both of his eyes removed because of cancer. So Daniel is a man, and I had saw this years ago and totally forgotten about him. I had seen that's him. He's echolocation. He will ride a bike and echolocate. He's president of World Access for the Blind, and that's a nonprofit organization that he founded back in 2000. And this is what it says. It's to the self-directed achievement of people with all forms of blindness. But here's what's wild, is not only did he teach himself how to do it, him and his group, his organization, has taught over 500 blind children around the world
To do that?
That form of echolocation. Yes.
I didn't see it. I've seen this guy. I mean, I didn't remember his name, of course.
Yes.
But I have seen that guy. But I didn't know he was able to teach other people that ability. That is what's really cool.
Well,
because how helpful would that be?
It gets even better.
Oh, yeah?
He actually, in 2009 in Madrid, Spain, at the University of Alcalá, he sat down with 10 subjects that were sighted and taught them how to do it. And within a few days, they could actually do it.
Dude, I'm going to sign up.
Right? You close your eyes, you learn how to echo. Now, I remember him saying, it always makes me think of the show now of, was it Daredevil? When he hears the sounds when you're watching the Netflix special, and it looks like he's seeing in a different color. The whole thing's funky around him. That's kind of what he talked about. It's because he's talking about moving cars, things around him he can hear. He clicks his tongue, and it bounces sounds off the whole thing. Would you consider that a superhuman power?
Yeah, I would have to say, right?
Well, they said, listen to this, that there was a study aimed to analyze various sounds which can be used to echolocate. And in this study, an MRI brain scans were taken of Daniel and another echolocation expert to identify the parts of the brain involved. And it suggests this, that the brain structures that process visual information in sighted people, but it actually, the same information in blind people, it's processed the same way. So the way your brain processes what you see, people that are blind using this process that exact same way, only through their ears.
Man.
So that's how they know what they're looking at.
So the neuropaths kind of like re-network, right?
It figures out a way. Life finds a way. It always finds a way. So then I'm like, well, let's go a little bit deeper. What's another one? So the first thing popped into my mind for that was an interview that I listened on Joe Rogan's podcast a while back with Wim Hof. You remember the Iceman?
Yeah, the Iceman.
Another one. That's it. And that's right, folks. If you haven't listened to it, Wim, W-I-M, Hof, H-O-F. If you want to check it out. Now, he actually has some breathing techniques that helps him survive cold, his body against the cold.
Yeah, you're right. You know, that's what people used to always make fun of the polar bear club. Look at these, guys that would jump into the freezing cold water. Turns out with this cryo freezing stuff, that is actually good for you.
It's not bad for you, exactly.
I saw a film my wife showed me just recently. It was like a little tiny clip on Facebook or something of in Russia, they make like these 8, 9-year-olds stripped down to nothing but their underwear, and they make them play and roll around in the snow.
And the water.
And water for 3 minutes. And they say you do that every day and nobody gets the flu.
Yeah. Toughens you up.
Yeah.
Because that's a different type of white people is what Joe Rogan says over there in Russia. They're not the same white people as we are over here. But that's what I'm talking about, is that that's a superpower. Wim Hof. Folks, I'll tell you more about Wim. He holds 20 world records, including the one from the longest ice bath. And when you're like, well, what's the longest? I'll give you, first of all, he claims that he can turn up what he says is his thermostat with these breathing exercises. Now, you can go online and learn them. He has his website up. You can go. He'll teach you how to do all this stuff, the whole thing. But in 2007, he climbed to, he didn't, summit Mount Everest, but he did. And the reason he said is because he hurt his foot. But he got to 22,000 feet wearing only shorts and shoes. That's all he wore. And in 2008, this is when he broke his record, he was in an ice bath, only his head sticking out, for 1 hour and 13 minutes, 48 seconds. Yeah. Now, in 2009, he actually summited Mount Kilimanjaro within 2 days. After that, he competed in a full marathon, but he did all that stuff, yet again, wearing shorts and sneakers. But the marathon he ran was in the Arctic Circle in Finland, and it was close to 20 below Celsius, 4 degrees Fahrenheit, wearing, again, nothing but shorts.
That's insane.
He did it in 5 hours and 25 minutes. So they went in, so they were like, look, we got to have to start checking in on this guy. So they start really checking on him, right? So he got immersed again for 1 hour and 44 minutes. 2011, that he did the ice endurance thing, another world record for 1 hour and 52 minutes, where he just stays in there longer and longer. He also said, it's not just that. I can make my body do what I want it to do. So he actually ran a full marathon in the desert without water. Now, he did this under like a whole idea of the doctors were watching him.
And don't try any of this, people.
No. And in 2015, January 15th of 2015, Wim Hof went again. He took 18 amateurs with him, and they all set the Guinness World Record. They ascended Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,341 feet, in a record group time of 31 hours and 25 minutes. And all of them are pretty much dressed the exact same way. It goes so far that the Fact or Faked television show actually did an episode on him back in 2012, where they actually took a team member of theirs, and they stuck him in some water, and they had Wim get in the water, and what they wanted to do was pull him out of the ice water and check their body core temperature with a scanner. So they did it with this team member of theirs. They stuck him in the water. He came after about 20 minutes. His actual body surface temperature had dropped by like 4 degrees. They pulled old Hoff out of the water. Not only did his heart rate never change, his body temperature never dropped. And he actually stayed submerged for over 90 minutes, where the other guy only could stay 20 before they pulled him out of there. All done from a breathing method. And you listen to him talk about, he's like, anybody can learn to do it. Would that be considered superhuman? I think it would be. It's nothing. We've all got a set of lungs.
Yeah,
we could all learn to do this.
To me, superhuman is something that you can achieve or do that the average person cannot.
Yeah. And
so I think you're right. He's something. He has the ability to teach himself how to do it. I don't know that it translates that you could teach anybody how to do it. He might be able to teach you how to withstand the cold a little better.
Yeah.
But at his level,
I don't know that you can
it's
learn
just like you're talking about with the pitching, or
Yeah.
whether you're talking about golf. Yeah, you can teach somebody and you can practice and get really damn good at it.
But not
But
him.
you can never achieve what like Jack Nicklaus can do or Tiger Woods used to be able to do. You know what I mean? You can practice all day long. It's never going to happen.
You get close,
You can get close.
but you won't be the chief.
That's the
It
reason.
just won't happen.
There's people that are professional in certain areas of life.
Yes. Well, that brought me to this fella. So I'm like, how does he do it? Is he, you always hear this thing, I'm harnessing my chi. That's what he's doing, his breathing.
Yeah.
So I got to look, and there's a fella named Master Zhao Tingzhu.
Oh, he's the master of the Denmark, right?
Well, kinda. He's a master of Qigong, Tai Chi, and Kung Fu Grandmaster. And he's actually been on, I watched a lot of his videos. He's been on a lot of television series, old and new.
I'll say, before you even start, just from my vast background of watching Kung Fu, when you say his name,
Yeah.
I'm already instant believe, yeah, this guy can do just about whatever you're about to tell me. Like he can walk on water. I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. Just because of the name.
He's bald, Kyle.
Oh, of course.
He has the 6 dots.
He has eyebrows that are at least like 12 inches long.
And the big, just like all the old movies. He is bald. He is bald for that. They actually had him on Stan Lee's Superhumans. And when I tell you, you're 100% going to buy into this.
No, but I
100%.
was just, when you were telling the last story, I was thinking, what was the name of that show with Stan Lee? And they had a young guy on there, and they would go to different parts of the world and check out these people. That's what I was thinking of. What was the name of that show?
Superhumans.
Superhumans.
With Stan Lee. Yes, Stan Lee's
I've seen a few episodes, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, on there, they actually started diagnosing, like run diagnostics and started testing Master Zhao Tingzhu, or Master Zhu is what it is. This is what they found out, and nobody can explain it. They would test him. The palms of his hands would get to 202 degrees Fahrenheit.
What?
Yes. Yeah. So I always think back to like Reiki, the Reiki guys that hold their, that's what I start thinking about. Now, I haven't seen this, but they say that he can shift his body weight from his legs to his chest, and that there's pictures or video or people have witnessed something, him standing on a sheet of paper.
Yeah, see, I believe that.
Yeah, see, I knew you would go on it. But it says
It's Master Zhao.
There's a lot of people, of course, that say that it's not real. You're going to have people all the time that say it's just, he tricks people, the way he controls what he says is his chi energy. And he actually addresses this, and he says that everybody claims this, but it's only until after he does a heat treatment, like a heating treatment with his hands on him. He said after that, everybody believes. When he's done, everybody believes. They're like, wow, I had no idea. So like we talked about, Ripley's Believe It or Not television series. I think back to the one with Dean Cain.
And I remember the show That's Incredible. Remember that?
He was actually on there too years ago. I only didn't bring it up because I didn't figure there'd be a lot of listeners out there who might know what it is. But that was a good show. Yeah, we were kids, but that was a great show. On that, they did, on Ripley's Believe It or Not, they actually used a thermal camera and could even see the hands, could see the spots, and started seeing vapor rise off a piece of cloth that he had his hands over right now. Now, there were some people, of course, it's like, look, it's not real, right? They're like, this isn't real. He's doing something else. But they actually had a dude, an anesthesiologist was one of his patients. And this anesthesiologist says, man, my back's hurt. I can't find a reason. What's going on? He goes to see, Master Zhao, and he fixes it. And the dude's like, man, I cannot explain what happened, but all I know is it's real. It's a real thing. Whatever this guy's doing is 100% real. But I've found something that's even crazier than this we're going to get into.
Please.
We're not the only ones interested in this as being maybe a superhuman trait. The CIA apparently was. For the last couple of decades, there's been experts that have studied certain individuals in Asia. And they was, according to some reports, these superhuman people. And these have, of course, been published in research papers and books, and people have reached out. There's a document that's actually called Chronology of Recent Interest in Exceptional Functions of the Human Body in the People's Republic of China. Now, in this, what they call a study, the Chinese government there discusses their work with parapsychology, remote viewing, and then, of course, they talk a little bit about Ingo Swann. I'm not going to get into Ingo, but we are going to have to discuss him in one of the shows coming up.
We get emails all the time about it. And every time I get the email, I'm always like, I really am shocked that we've never discussed that.
Yeah, we're going to have to discuss it. But these documents, some of them are actually being released through FOIA because the CIA had them. The CIA was doing a lot of this studies on these people over in Asia with all this, which is wild about these superhuman abilities. So in 1979, there was a Chinese scientific journal, and it's called the Nature Journal. I'm not even about to pronounce it, folks. But they had a report in this journal called the Non-Visual Pattern Recognition, and they actually had several people come forward and make these claims of exceptional human body function, and that there was places that they had actually confirmed this. So as, of course, a result, there was a preliminary organization to study this type of thing under the Nature Journal. So these guys got together. So they're like, all right, we're going to find this out. We're going to see if this is real. You roll it up a year later. This journal, and there was a Chinese Human Body Science Association. They got together, and in 1980, they held like a parapsychology conference in Shanghai. And they had participants in 20 research institutes and universities. So they're taking this serious. So they all get together, and what they're looking to study was remote viewing, clairvoyance, pyrokinesis, telepathy. They had a bunch of other things that they had listed off. This is what they were looking for. So you jump ahead. In 1981, there was over 100 centers that were studying children with these apparently exceptional abilities, and some even have exceptional mental capabilities. And they had all of these people, and they got 100 what they said were trained scholars that had gone through all these studies to help them study these children. So you jump forward another year. The Chinese Academy of Sciences actually sponsored a public hearing in Beijing back in 1982, and there were more than 4,000 attendees there regarding a case of a parapsychological ability within humans. And they actually wanted, what they said was they called it all together to get all these groups of people together for a fair but strictly controlled test so they could actually maybe get a final reckoning on this of what we're looking at. You're going to have 4,000 people there, all of them looking, all of them trying to figure it all out. Well, there was a joint trial back in April of 1982 that was put together by the party's National Committee of Science at Beijing's Teachers College. Now, they were people, of course, from both sides, positive and negative. So they were skeptics and believers alike showed up. Now, they say that what they found after all this was, of course, mostly negative. They found that a bunch of this was hogwash. It was either people, little sleight of hand, things like that, which is what you would expect. But if there is even a
small amount that's real, that's still incredible.
They found one. They found one person. One of them was a man named Zhang Baxing. Now, Mr. Baxing was born in 1958, and he's known now as a famous Qigong Grand Master, much like Master Zhao up there we discussed also.
Mm-hmm.
Zhang was a miner there in China, and he was discovered, what they said, to be able to read with his nose and see through people's bodies, and to be able to place objects in closed containers without touching them. So be able to put stuff inside of bottles or jars and never touch all of it. So, of course, like we talked about, that magazine, the Nature magazine. Well, back in 1982 on May, the editor, his last name was Rulong, well, he was like, he introduced Zhang to the marshal there in China.
Yeah.
Well, so we go in here. So Zhang, and this is what it said, had reportedly to have smelled a piece of contents or a piece of paper on this message that was written to the master, to the marshal, that was folded up on slips of paper. All right. So it was like folded up, put inside something and all this stuff, but they could tell what he had written on. So I was like, okay, some smell, so maybe the guy had some kind of funky liniment on his hand. The dude just knew it. He's like, okay, no big deal. Well, it goes on to say that he was also able to move sealed objects in and out of sealed containers.
And that's what interests me. Like, what is that?
Exactly. So they're still claiming this whole thing. So in 1984, he became a full-time subject of the military to run a research team, the psychic research team that they had. Now, like I said, they go on to claim that there were small pieces of paper and he could move them in and out of sealed tubes to test this. They also say that researchers observed the process and videotaped it numerous times from numerous angles, and that they concluded this, that somehow the pieces of paper, which were placed into sealed tubes, appeared outside even though the small tubes remained still sealed and showed no traces of damage. Yes. They say he was also able to perform the same thing with paper clips and with live insects. He could take them in and out of these sealed tubes. Now, if you go on, in that CIA document, it actually says this, and this comes directly from the document. A wooden cabinet, 120 by 180 by 60 centimeters, was used as a sealed container. Sheets of paper and boards with one-of-a-kind markings were used as the target objects and placed inside the cabinet on the upper shelf. Without damaging the cabinet or opening the door, the person with ESP was able to remove the target objects and also was able to put them back inside. This demonstrates that even when using especially large container, it is possible to completely break through spatial barriers. However, the success rate was much lower and was exceptionally difficult. So what they're saying is he could still do it. Larger things. So if you think back what I talked about, little pieces of paper, paper clips, live insects, small things.
Right.
When it gets larger, it's harder for him to do it. So that's what he said, but it was still being done. Well, there is a book written, and this book is called China's Super Psychics. And this little excerpt comes on January 3rd, 1987. In the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee Training Center in Beijing, an official test was conducted where a Chinese psychic transported 44 medicine pills out of a sealed bottle and also sent into the bottle a piece of candy. The test was conducted under scientific circumstances with government witnesses. The individual who conducted the test is named Zhang Baoxing. Zhang and other people with the ability to demonstrate high levels of external pranic power had been termed by the Chinese government as having exceptional human functions, commonly referred to as EHF. People with these abilities are now viewed as national treasures in China, and that Zhang often demonstrates his amazing powers on Chinese television, and he's a nationwide celebrity in China. Now, it goes on to say that reportedly this happened, that there was a foreign government sent an agent to China to offer him $20 million U.S. and invited him to their country for research activities. He refused. Now, it's funny they used $20 million U.S., so it makes you think the U.S. went out there after him. Maybe we did. Who knows?
I was going to say, do you think that when they were testing some of these people with these special abilities, that once they proved that they have them, that they then approached them to hire them to create some super squad or something?
I would almost guarantee that's
what
happened. Because you can't have, it's the same as all the angles in the old X-Men movies, things like that. You can't have people like this just running around. That's a threat to national security. If you had somebody that could easily go, I need you to go in there and I need you to take that piece of paper out.
Or that flash drive, the little
yeah, but we don't know how far he could move it. It never says that he could just make it appear in front of him. It's just right outside the jar, right inside the jar. That's pretty much it.
Still.
Exactly, still. We don't know to what extent he could be taught, to what he could learn to do. It says this. It says that one of his most astounding exhibitions is the movement of a 100-pound sack of sugar through the walls of a storehouse, with it ending up setting up in front of the scientific witness. So it just says that he took a 100-pound bag of sugar, moved it out of a warehouse, and put it up in front of the person sitting across from him.
Wow.
So that right there tells you he could move it out. So yes, you're a national threat. At that point, you're a 100% national threat. Now, they say that he had a really crazy sense of humor, Zhang did. He loved practical jokes. And it goes on that actually having his abilities made it even that much more fun. They say that he received an automobile, a very nice car, from a billionaire there in Hong Kong that was a huge fan of his. And that Zhang would drive it around town and break all the rules. He didn't care. Run red lights, speed, he didn't care. They said because when they gave him tickets, the officer would laugh about it, and he would laugh about it. And then when the officer got back to his desk, the tickets were gone. There was no copies of it. So Zhang would just transport him to wherever he was at. So whatever copies, he could just take out whatever he wanted to. That's as the story goes. Sounds like a great story. A great story. And it also goes on to say that the officers got so much used to it that they wouldn't even stop him anymore on the whole thing, that he could just make any of them disappear.
Talk about your all-time pickpocket, right?
Right, exactly.
You get a crowd, you can just make it go from your pocket to mine without even touching you.
So I got to looking more into this, and something clicked. And I was thinking, what about the monks in Tibet?
Yeah.
You always hear the wild stuff that they do like that. And I'm
walking
thinking,
on coals or whatever.
There has to be a place for this. So I got to looking. There was a professor named Herbert Benson, and back in the 80s, he and his team of researchers from Harvard School of Medicine went to some monasteries in the Himalayan mountains, and they were there to look and document and decode the ways that these monks manipulate their bodies. So they went there believing like this. They could raise their fingertips, the temperatures of their fingertips and their toes, they documented by as much as 17 degrees. They could also lower their body's metabolic rate, and then also they said they could lower it by 64%. And they did all this by a yoga technique called the Tumo. Okay? They said that they also, while there, the research team from Harvard recorded this, that monks drying cold, wet sheets with body heat. So I'm assuming they would either put them on or hang them up and get right next to them, and they would actually dry out the sheets because they could create so much heat from their body. They said that they also had witnessed monks spending the night after on a winter night when it was like 0 on a rocky ledge, 15,000 feet up in the mountains, and all he had on was like cotton pants, and they would just stand out there on that ledge all night in meditation in that cold. Now, the research team from Harvard said they observed, and they were blown away by what was achieved by these daily meditations. Said there was guided exercises and spiritual conditioning that these monks were doing. And this is a quote here. This comes from one of the books, one of the notes that they had. In a monastery in northern India, thinly clad Tibetan monks sat quietly in a room where the temperature was a chilly 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Using a yoga technique known as Jitumo, they entered a state of deep meditation. Other monks soaked 3 by 6 foot sheets in cold water, 49 degrees, and placed them over the meditator's shoulders.
Okay.
For untrained people, such frigid wrappings would produce uncontrolled shivering. If body temperatures continued to drop under these conditions, death can result. But it was not long before steam began rising from the sheets as a result of body heat produced by the monks during meditation. The sheets dried in about an hour.
That's crazy.
Yes. Now, it goes on to say that based on these experiments and his experience there, that Mr. Benson stressed this, that a better understanding of advanced meditation could lead to better treatment for stress-related illness. And here's something else that he wrote. More than 60% of visits to physicians in the United States are due to stress-related problems, most of which are poorly treated by drugs, surgery, or other medical procedures. If such an easy-to-master practice can bring about the remarkable changes we observe, I want to investigate what advanced forms of meditation can do to help the mind control physical processes once thought to be uncontrollable. My hope is that self-care will stand equal with medical drugs, surgery, and other therapies that are now used to alleviate mental and physical suffering. Along with nutrition and exercise, mind-body approaches can be part of self-care practices that could save millions of dollars annually in medical costs. Now, I tell you all of that to go back to Wim Hof. Wim Hof was beating the same thing with cold, a breathing exercise, which is more like meditation.
Yeah.
You start talking about you're creating heat with the body, these Qigong masters, these Qi masters. Wim Hof also tells people that he can make himself not sick. He can lower his heart rate, raise his heart rate. He can make the illnesses leave. He can do these things. So in 2011, there was a researcher and an adjunct professor at New York University, and this was a Buddhist monk himself named Zoran Josipovic. And he placed the minds and bodies of prominent Buddhist monks into a functional MRI machine. They wanted to track the blood flow to their brains while they were meditating. And in a BBC interview, he says this: the brain appears to be organized into 2 networks, the extrinsic network and the intrinsic or default network. The extrinsic portion of the brain becomes active when individuals are focused on external tasks, like playing sports or pouring a cup of coffee. The default network churns when people reflect on matters that involve themselves and their emotions. But the networks are rarely fully active at the same time, and, like a seesaw, when one rises, the other dips down. This neural setup allows individuals to concentrate more easily on one task at any given time without being consumed by distractions like daydreaming. But some Buddhist monks and other experienced meditators have the ability to keep both neural networks active at the same time during meditation. That is to say, they have found a way to lift both sides of the seesaw simultaneously. This ability to churn both the internal and external networks in the brain concurrently may lead the monks to experience a harmonious feeling of oneness with their environment.
Wow.
So they're doing scientific studies. They're like, dude, it's all real. What these guys are doing, people can learn to do through yoga, through meditation, through breathing. It's real. So all the stuff you hear about the woo-woo factor, that's real. And in 2008, there was a neuroscientist named Dr. Richard J. Davidson, and he conducted research on a Tibetan Buddhist monk at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to find out how meditation makes the Buddhist monk's brain superhuman. And he discovered this, that over the course of meditating for tens of thousands of hours, the long-term practitioners could dramatically increase neuroplasticity and had actually altered the structure and function of their brains. So with that being said, is what this man's moving these things in and out, when you alter the structure and the function, did they unlock other areas that we don't know about? Because they are in there. Now he says hundreds or tens of thousands of hours. So it's not something you're going to be able to do just by meditating for 15 or 20 minutes on the weekend. This is stuff that these people, that's all these guys do, is turn in. And they just meditate and grind and meditate and grind and unlock their own potential. And so it makes me wonder, are these crazy feats that we're seeing being done, are these coming from people that are in constant meditation? Because I bet if you go and look, it's under it goes back into with the guy with Daniel Kish. He's blind. He doesn't have the input coming from his eyes. You follow me?
Yeah. No,
so it only
right.
comes from one stream. So is his brain operating the same way? Is it a way of forced meditation without him even realizing it? Because he's locked into his own mind. You don't have visual input. So with all that we've covered today, folks, I'm going to leave you with this. Alexandria David Neal. She was a Belgian-French explorer, a Buddhist, a spiritualist. She was born in 1868. She passed away in September of 1969. She's most well known for going to Lhasa back in 1924 in Tibet when it was completely and totally forbidden to foreigners. No one could get in there. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, there was some writings. Now, she actually published a book called Magic and Mystery in Tibet back in 1929. She wrote over 30 of them. And there were some writings that says that at Cum Bum, Miss Neal apparently managed to create a tulpa, a psychic phantom produced by intense concentration of thought and the repetition of relevant mystical rites over a period of months. She created a stout phantom monk whose form gradually became less ghost-like and more lifelike. Before long, it says here that the phantasm was accompanying her on her travels and behaving almost like a normal human being. However, he gradually began to change from a fat, jolly monk to a leaner, more sinister character and started to escape from her control. The tulpa was seen by others in her traveling party, proving it to have an objective existence outside of Alexandria's own mind. But to avoid serious problems with her creation, Alexandra decided to dissolve it, but this proved extremely difficult as the phantom clung desperately to his life. She only succeeded in getting rid of him after 6 months of hard mental concentration. So she's learned all these things from these monks. Now you go on, it says, soon after this, in February of 1921, Alexandra and a person named Yodgin left all their belongings and, disguised as beggars, set off on their journey to the forbidden Tibet and the holy city of Lhasa. Says the journey was to last an epic 3 years, and the details are recounted in her book, My Journey to Lhasa, that was published in English in 1927. Says the route, as the crow flies, was 3,900 miles, but Alexandra's expedition was a different matter. Now listen to this here. Says that she was twice intercepted and often had to change her plans. And at one stage, in early of 1923, she went as far north as the Gobi Desert, from where she returned via Lanchao down south through China and westwards into southern Tibet. Although her journey covered around 8,000 miles on horse, a sedan chair, and foot, along the way bandits were a menace, as were tigers and leopards. But on the journey, they met a strange phenomenon known as Lungom runner. That's right, a Lungom runner. First seen as a distant moving black spot, this rapidly changed into a man running towards them at an incredible speed. Alexandra was warned not to stop the speeding llama or it would kill him. Now she also says, she writes in this, it says, I noticed far away in front of us a moving black spot, which my field glasses showed to be a man, and I felt astonished. Meetings are not frequent in that region, but as I continued to observe him through the glasses, I noticed that the man proceeded at an unusual gait, and especially with an extraordinary swiftness. The man did not run. He seemed to lift himself from the ground, proceeding by leaps. It looked as if he had been endowed with the elasticity of a ball and rebounded each time his feet touched the ground. Now, when she looked closely at him, she said she could see that his expression was extremely relaxed and staring fixed at an imaginary faraway object. She also says that he held a magic dagger in his right hand, which he seemed to be using as a staff, though he was very high off the ground, and that apparently these runners would carry on these amazing feats for days without stopping for food or water, and that she was told that years of meditation were required before undertaking this feat. So I got to looking in the Lungompa runners of old Tibet. And this is what I found, that if you want to become one of those, if you decide you want to run like this.
No, I don't.
Well, you're going to have to spend some time by yourself in a cave. 3 years.
Wow.
You're going to have to spend 3 years. You're going to have to learn the breathing exercises and the chantings of Buddhist mantras. You're going to have to, practice this leaping. And not only that, but they would jump in the air without using their hands. They just jump up and go cross-legged, drop to the ground. Jump up, cross-legged, drop to the ground. They just do all these things. You do all that. You're light as a feather. You have all this heightened state of mind. You have all these things. So you go to look, and now it was all said, now this is a legend, that the Lungompa runners could run for 48 hours without rest, and they would cover 200 miles a day. That's what was said. So, and this whole thing, now it signifies, Lung signifies the air or vital energy, and the pranas of these yogis, as we call it.
Right.
Gom means meditation or focused concentration. So this vital energy concentration or vital energy meditation is kind of what this Lungompa means when they talk about this. So it's the art of harnessing spiritual energy, conscious through breathing, and then transcending the physical limits of their body. Now, like we said, there's plenty of these people that have looked into this. Even some, there was a German-born Buddhist monk, Govinda, and it's through his travels in Tibet in 47, and he described some of the process of how that they went about doing it, and that they've forsaken all these claims to life, they lose their name, it's all anonymity, and all they do is train. That's all these monks do, and that it's a meditation for 3 to 9 years if you get approved to be one of these runners, and that during the time of seclusion, they are allowed no human contact. Food is passed to this monk through a small opening in the wall, and he spends all his days chanting, meditating, and deep breathing. And for physical exercise, he paces his chambers, and they say that he also practices the art of levitating or yogic flying, as it's known today. And like we said, he sits cross-legged, fills his lungs with a deep breath, and then leaps into the air without using his hands. So it's not only that. So I guess I got it wrong. You're not jumping and crossing your legs. You cross your legs, and then you jump off the ground with your legs crossed.
I've seen him do that in kung fu movies.
Yeah, well, that's part of this whole thing. And it says that he repeats this exercise over and over and over, and he keeps going through all this. And it says after this amount of years, the right amount of years is passed, he's released from his seclusion. It says at this point, he has become so light and subtle that he can move with the speed of a galloping horse while hardly touching the ground. And he is now qualified to serve as a Meikitang, which is according to the ancient Tibetan legend, is the runner that must be sent every year to the far corners of the country to collect spiritual demons that haunt the land. Yes.
Wow.
So there is a lot that goes into these runners going through all this stuff. And I can go on and on about all this. In the 50s in Tibet, of course, they said that the training retreated underground because the Chinese invaded and destroyed the majority of the Tibetan monasteries up there. So a lot of this stuff has gone underground. Nobody knows it. It's kind of been quiet, but there's still some training in secret that you go. There's still some Tibetan monks, though. Whenever they say they nail them down, they go and the guys do all this research and they go, we want you to tell us about the Lungam Pai, but they won't even hardly talk about it.
Wow.
It's just one of those things that I guess it's something that you could also use it for evil. I mean, you could.
It's like the Force.
Exactly. You could train somebody to be, like a killer. Like you're talking about a bunch of Navy SEALs
Super
that you train.
assassins,
Exactly.
right?
So that's not what they wish to do. So there is more to this. And I think what we found with all this stuff is if you turn it inwards, we could all be superhumans. If you just practice, we could all meditate. We could all take better care of ourselves. We could all elevate one another to the next level, and let's all get along with one another. Let's all be happy. Let's be nice. Let's elevate that to be superhuman. So let's start 2017 off, folks. Let's all be superhuman.
Sounds good to me.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll wrap this dumpling up, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives.
If you enjoyed the last story, but feel like you need more, then you need to join Expanded Perspectives Elite. Expanded Perspectives Elite is an entirely separate show where myself and Kyle explore the same topics as we do every week on Expanded Perspectives, only in a more laid-back and uncensored way. By joining Expanded Perspectives Elite, you will get an additional show every Thursday or Friday, as well as access to the entire back catalog, which consists of over 100 episodes for only $5 a month. Shows such as the Hopkinsville Encounter, The Mysterious Case of Elisa Lam, the mysteries surrounding Friendship Island, the Aquatic Ape Theory, as well as collaborations in our studio with your favorite authors like Micah Hanks, Nick Redfern, and Mr. Lyle Blackburn. To join Expanded Perspectives Elite, simply go to the website, expandedperspectives.com, and click on the Elite tab. Signing up is easy, and there are 2 plans to choose from, $5 a month or $55 a year. Expanded Perspectives Elite, the next step in expanding your perspective.
And we're back with Expanded Perspectives. I love the stories of superheroes. I love the idea of that. And like we talked about, I think you're right. There are people that, they work better on themselves and they somehow seem to rise above the average person.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, though, just most people with their normal everyday lives just do not have the ability to do that. When you were mentioning the runners, it always makes me think of Tanis with the runner, looking for a runner or something.
Yeah.
I kind of was picturing that in my mind. And I love the picture, these ancient monks, these Shaolin monks, because I love the Kung Fu movies. Well, Cam, I hope you and your family have a wonderful Christmas and a great New Year. But before we get out of here, let's not forget to mention our sponsor, Gaia, GAIA.com. They have a video streaming service with over 7,000 titles. You can go over there, and they've got lots of interesting documentaries. I always bring these up because I love them. I was recently watching one underneath the Cosmic Disclosure section. It's called Close Encounters with Clifford Stone. And on there, a guy describes actually meeting an extraterrestrial being that we had in captivity. Check this out.
They had one of the entities, one of our visitors that was left behind. And he was being held as a guest at this location in the wooded area. So I went there. And when I got there, he was sitting there. and they had guards all around the place. And as soon as I went in, he looked up at me. And when he looked up at me, no one else could hear what was being said. Just like I say, I could hear it like you and I talking, but I could also feel it. He said, "I am afraid." And I could feel the fear, and I could also see, his concern about seeing his family again. And I said, there's no one going to hurt you. But, he had that fear. So I went ahead, and I said, well, what can I do? He says, my people are coming to get me. And if they come here, they're not going to try to hurt no one. But because of the technology to extract me from inside this building, many of your kind will die and be injured.
Well, there you go, folks. If you'd like to hear or see more of stuff like that, you need to sign up for Gaia, GAIA.com. It's a wonderful service. There was another interesting one that I saw not too long ago with Richard Dolan, talking about extraordinary encounters with extraterrestrial entities. That one was very cool. The deep space section is very interesting. I love that one. That's probably my favorite so far. And then, of course, there's secrets and cover-ups and ancient origins. And then there's just films and documentaries, just normal films, movies. There's a section for yoga and transformation, which has a lot to do with meditating. So if you liked this episode about trying to meditate and better yourself, you might go over to Gaia.com, start doing some yoga, and start getting into meditation. Cam. Do you have anything left for this last week here on Expanded Perspectives, the last week of the year?
Man,
I don't. It's pretty much coast from here on out for me. I mean, I have to go to work, but there's not really a whole lot of work going on because all my clients are busy doing stuff with their families too, so it's really hard. I've luckily looked at a lot of stuff, so I've got a lot of office work this week. And I've also had some technical problems with some equipment around here in the studio. I need to get working on that. I'm going to have free time. So when I'm done assembling toys, I'm going to get onto some of that. As you can see, look, there's a panel right there that needs to be glued.
Yeah.
This acoustic audio foam. Just little things like that. You're not going out of town, I guess, is what you're not having Christmas in Oklahoma or anything.
No, we're not going anywhere. We are sticking around here. And like you said, the best thing is I got most all my stuff done, my big groove done. I've only got a few days. Still, putting the grind in with my mom. I mean, it's set back a little bit. She's having a rough go of it. So just trying to get her, I'm up there every day, stop by and see her and hang out and try. And so it's just,
she'll get better.
Yeah, it's just going to take some time. So, yeah, thanks to everybody that sent messages and everybody, and all that stuff. I really appreciate it. So, it's just a grind. So, we'll get her back going, see how it gets going.
Right.
And all that, but I think she'll be all right.
If you'd like to give a Christmas gift to Expanded Perspectives and you'd like to give a gift to me and Cam, there's probably no better gift than you could give us than just going and writing a nice review for us on iTunes. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and check that out. If you'd like to share a story with us, you can email the show at expandedperspectives@yahoo.com. You can always call the show 817-945-3828. You can follow us on all forms of social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You know the deal, folks. I hope everybody out there has an incredible Christmas, and we'll speak to you Elite members on Thursday. For everybody else, I guess we'll be talking to you next year. I'm Kyle Filson. He's Cam Hale.
Peace, y'all.